All right, all right. What's up, fight fans? Tuesday, June 18th. We'll wait a little bit. Um, just watched the NBA Finals. I just want to say I hate the Boston Celtics. Yeah, they won their 18th championship. I'm not a fan of Boston. I've never been a fan of Boston. Like I said, if you don't know me, I was born and raised in Northeast Ohio. I'm a Cleveland fan through and through. I'm a diehard Cavs fan, diehard Indians fan, diehard Browns fan, and they'll always be the Indians in my heart. So I guess you could say, even though I live in Sydney, Australia, I'm a Northeast Ohio homer. Okay, so we're still kind of, the smoke is cleared from this past weekend, and specifically the 135-pound division and the 140-pound division. Over the last few days, I've made videos on the Liam Paro victory, the Gervonta Davis victory, broken down the statistics of each. And today I put up a video playing sort of fortune teller on a unification bout between Tank and Loma. And the video's up right now. If you haven't watched it, watch that video. I want your comments and I want your opinion on that fight. It's time for Tank to unify. It's time for these fighters to fight for the belts, the champions. We want to see champions fight champions. This is something that Turkey Al-Sheikh has literally come out of nowhere and, stepped up, put the money down. Hopefully we see that WBA and IBF belt at 135. And people were going to say, oh, it should have happened years ago. Okay, but let's make it happen now. Tank's 29, Loma's 36. That's the fight I want to see. That stylistic matchup excites me. I'm also seeing comments. You guys want Shakur to fight Tank. We'll see if that happens. Shakur has to handle his business with his upcoming fight, and he's fighting Artem Harutyan. Harutyan is the guy that Frank Martin beat. So, I think he might be 12-1. You guys will hold me to it. Let's see what Harutyan's record is. He doesn't have a lot of experience. He is why did I think he was 12? He's 30. He's 12-1. I was right. I got to stick to my guns here. 12-1. Lost to Frank his only fight. Fighting Shakur Stevenson, and then we'll see what happens after that fight. The belt at 135. We know Denis Berinchyk and Lomachenko, two Ukrainians, have two of the belts, and then we got two Americans. We got Tank and Shakur. Now, the fight I want to see first is Tank versus Loma. I want to see that fight. I want to see if Lomachenko will do what he says he's going to do. He said after the George Kambosos fight, this stage of his career, he's focusing on fighting, moving less, and punching more. And he got George. I think he beat George via 11th round stoppage, and 12 of his 18 victories are via knockout. I know he has around 63% knockout to win ratio. So I want to see if Tank would be able to figure out the puzzle of Lomachenko's footwork. I want to see if Tank's style, that marauding coming forward style, taking shots initially early on to land his big shots later on. I want to see if that'll work against Lomachenko. Tank's never fought a boxer with that footwork like Lomachenko has. And we'll see this 36-year-old version if he could fend off Tank. I want to see it. 5'5", Loma's 5'8". Believe it or not, even though Tank is shorter, he has the longer reach. Why does that matter? Tank fights for how short he is. Tank landed that uppercut against Frank, and if you watch that punch in slow motion, he threw that from his hip. It looked like it came from the middle of the ring. It was so far away, that uppercut, the first punch that landed in the knockout sequence, that I didn't even see it. I thought it was just that kind of looping left hand or that looping right hand that he threw that knocked Frank out when he was on the ropes. But if you replay that, there's a looping uppercut that he landed from outfield. And so I'm interested. I'm also interested in the Shakur fight. But right now, the Lomachenko fight interests me a bit more. In the video, I talked about both guys, Tank and Lomachenko's last 5 fights in terms of their resume, what they've been up to, what their strength of schedules are. Tank Davis's last 5, 93-1. So his opponent's record's coming in on the night of the fight, 93-1. And Lomachenko's not that far behind. I think he's at 114-6. So all those stats are in the video that I did. Tank's last 5, 93-1, and Loma's like I said, 114-6. Guys, we're up on Instagram now. We started this Instagram page only a month ago. There's only about 60 followers, Boxing News Today. We're building our Facebook back. We had it at 115,000. Facebook jacked it for me last month, restarted it from scratch, and we're floating around 5,000. So if you guys are on Facebook, subscribe to the group Boxing News Today. I appreciate it. When we're talking about, I just want to show you the cover. This was the headline in the paper down here in Australia. This one's for you, brother. Liam Perro. Mackie is just a little neighborhood in Queensland, Australia. Mackie boxer dedicates shock victory to lost mate. You know, boxing's one of these sports where it's always Jack P. What's up, buddy? Jack, what do you think about Tank's next opponent? Who do you want to see him fight? Do you want that Shakur fight? Do you want that Lomachenko fight? It seems to be social media is kind of torn with that right now. If I'm just reading the comments in the boxing groups, that some people want, a lot of people are saying it's too late to fight Loma, and I don't agree. I still want to see that Lomachenko fight, but we got to figure out what we're gonna, who fights Liam next? Eddie Hearn's talking about a unification bout between. I think he said Haney. Eddie wants to bring Haney down to Australia, but I know the Aussies don't want that fight. The Aussies, and then I read today that Hearn was saying Richardson Hitchens being a mandatory for Perro. But if I had to choose between the two, I'd much rather see Haney come back to Australia, get his frequent flyer miles up. He's already been here twice in 2 years. Has to be Loma now or never. We always judge a career by who you fight. Yeah, 100%. And that's my point with the Lomachenko fight, is that late, people are like, oh, it's too late. I'd rather it be late than never. You know what I'm saying? And 5 years ago, when we think about where Tank was in his career 5 years ago, here's some numbers for you to think about. 5 years ago, Loma was 31. Tank was 24. Okay? Tank is now 29. Loma is now 36. 5 years have passed. People are giving a lot of heat to Tank because they call him a 29-year-old prospect, which I don't understand. I mean, how many people are calling him that who's ever boxed before? He's WBA champion. Terrence Crawford became two-time undisputed champion at 36 years old. You know, we knew a lot of those years were spent with Top Rank, not really doing what he wanted to do with his career. But Bud is 36 and Tank's only 29. Think about how much room Tank could cover in his career legacy in 7 years. And I don't like comparing fighters' career paths, but that's something to think about. And Bud is still as hungry as ever. We know he has that August 3rd matchup with Madrimov. Speaking on Bud, he posts this today with the caption. We all know he does his training camps in Colorado Springs. He posts this caption, "The King of the Monsters." And that's him doing his strength and conditioning. If you follow Bud Crawford on social media, he loves his traditional strength and conditioning, a lot of farmer walks, a lot of trap bar deadlifts, a lot of high intensity training. He loves running those mountains in Colorado Springs, and he's an old-time grinder. So his motivation is just as high at 36 to become undisputed in a third division. Tank's only 29. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think because he busted on the scene and he's very marketable. It's been a marketing sort of, whoever's behind that machine, they've done a brilliant job in terms of marketing his career, because he's been in and out of jail. He's been on the wrong side of the law. But when he's in the ring, when the lights are on him and it's his time to shine, boy, does he shine. When's the last time he was in a boring fight? This is what I think people don't understand when people say the face of boxing. I mean, when's the last time Tank was in a boring fight? Every time you watch a Tank fight, it's goddamn chaos. There's fireworks, dude. I love that he's doing the backflip before the fight now. I love Jordan Plant, Caleb's wife, asking the question about the backflip, because now we don't have to wait until the fight. He did it at the weigh-in, after the weigh-in, and he did it after the fight. And something that when I was rewatching the knockout, I didn't realize is the fact that Tank goes to the ropes to do the backflip before the ref even counted Frank out. So that was interesting. He knew that he was done. He knew that he was out cold. has to be Loma or fight one of the young kings now because after Loma, Tank will be in their 30s while they will be in their prime. Yeah, that division, that's why like the 135-pound division in boxing, the 140-pound division in boxing, it always kind of produces these marketable guys. Obviously, we know at 35, Baranchik is not going to fight Lomachenko. So maybe you go, it would be a good fight. I wonder Frank Martin, what do you do with Frankie? That's another conversation. We just can't throw Frank away. Stylistically, when you look at Frank Martin, does he pick himself up? Does he get a big fight? You got to give him a big fight. He had a good showing. He fought well for how long it lasted. There are lessons to be learned in losses, and one of those lessons he could obviously take from that is obviously pacing himself and not standing in front of a knockout artist such as Gervonta Davis. And when he watches the tape back, he'll see that he stood around the fourth round. He was just kind of watching him a bit and letting Tank do his thing, and Tank was just sitting on some bombs. I can see Loma with an upset if it could go all 12 against Tank. Lomachenko, it's both. The reason why I'm fascinated, Nasir, with your comment is because how do we bet against? It's hard to bet against Lomachenko. Everybody here, most people online will say that Loma beat Devin, and how do you bet against Tank? You know what I'm saying? Like, think about the last fight with Frank. He was a 7-1 underdog for a reason. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh my God, it's so hard to bet against Frank Martin. Or, oh my God, it's so hard to bet against Ryan Garcia. Or, oh my God, it's so hard to bet against Hector Garcia. Or, oh my God, it's so hard to bet against Rolly Romero. Or, oh my God, it's so hard to bet. You see what I'm saying? Pitbull Cruz. I'm reading you Gervonta's resume. But Lomachenko would be the first one in his resume if they fought that I would be like, it would be Loma would be Tank's first opponent that I would be like, wow, it's hard to bet against Lomachenko. So that's why I'm fascinated with that matchup. And only time will tell. It seems like now more than ever, though, as boxing fans, we're getting the fights that we want to see. And you might not. And if there is a fight that you don't want to see, I'm doing my best to hype up the Madrimov Bud fight because watch some of Madrimov's training videos, watch some of Madrimov's prior fights, watch his highlight tapes, watch how he does his thing. Madrimov is flashy in there, but technical, switches stances just like Bud. Madrimov is going to pose some questions to Bud that he hasn't yet seen yet in terms of a fighter mid-stance who has knockout power in both sides, who could fight southpaw and knock you out and could fight ortho and knock you out. Bud's never fought a guy like that. He's never fought at 154. He's never fought somebody that big. So when I say we're getting the fights we want to see, a lot of people would say, well, we don't want to see, nobody asked for the Bud fight versus Madrimov. Well, I didn't ask for it, but any boxing nerd, if they do their homework, you could find sort of value in that fight. Now, Shakur versus Arutunian, I mean, Shakur needs to figure out his marketing. Shakur needs a big performance. Shakur needs to come out and look electric against Harutunian. But Harutunian is not a guy that a lot of people look great against. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully we see the Shakur versus Jamel Herring. I don't understand all the hate Shakur gets. I get because they claimed against Edwin De Los Santos they didn't like the way he went about his business. But it is boxing. It's not rock'em sock'em robots. The game is about who can get to the final bell and win and keep their hand raised. And we know it's not Shakur's fault that in this modern day age of boxing, the O matters. You know what I'm saying? Who a fighter would probably fight differently in a different era. And Shakur does have all the skills. I know a lot of you guys don't like the way he handles himself on Twitter, but Shakur Stevenson is a classy boxer. That matchup, I want to see Tank versus Loma first, and then Shakur handles business against Harutunian. And I'd love to see Shakur versus Tank because there's some questions that Shakur can make Tank have to answer that Tank hasn't had to answer yet. Sometimes I just need you to win without looking good. Exactly. That's a great point. You got to win without looking good, and winning is the most important bit here. One of the comments I made in the video I did about Tank and Frank in the recap video that's doing pretty well right now. It's at about 15,000 views is fucking viral, right? I'm new to the game. I mean, I've only been doing boxing YouTube for a year. So why I reference that, of the 9-minute video, I do the breakdown of how the fight went down, the knockout sequence, etc. one of the things that a lot of the negative comments were talking about was when I said, um, what type of fighter beats Tank? I said, you got to what fighter out there, what style? In my head, it has to be the style that forces Tank to go backwards and fight off of his back foot. And everybody was commenting, no, what are you talking about? Didn't you watch the Rolly Romero knockout? That was one sequence. Rolly Romero, guys, does not have defense. He's not a world-class fighter. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm saying forcing Tank to fight backwards. What I mean by that, and I should have elaborated, and I'll get better on elaborating because I'm learning through the negative comments. What I mean by forcing Tank to fight backwards isn't in one sequence, because Tank's a good counterboxer. It's controlling the center foot. It's controlling that lead foot in the center of the ring and the ring generalship. And throughout the fight, not letting Tank do what he wants to do with his front foot. And look, even though he lost the first 3 rounds against Frank, Tank controlled the footwork game the whole fight. What I mean by fighting a fighter who could control that lead foot and not allow Tank, cut Tank off, not allow him to do what he wants to do on offense, that's the fighter, in my opinion, the style that could beat Tank. And, you know, I don't know if that's Shakur. I don't know if that's Lomachenko. I don't know if Tank retires undefeated, but it's fun to think about. And when you break down the minutia of boxing, when you break down your favorite fighters and their styles and how they go about their business, these are the questions you have to ask yourself. I always ask myself about Crawford. What style beats Crawford? And you gotta find a style with Bud that is as sharp and professional in terms of defensive minded as him, but also could kind of bully him. And the reason why I'm kind of intrigued by the Madrimov matchup is because Madrimov is thick and he has good movement. He has good feet. He does a lot of unorthodox things. And it's going to be interesting to see if Bud can answer those questions. Up until now in his career, he's answered all of them. But this is what makes boxing such a unique sport. So I once called boxing chess and MMA checkers, and I got into it with a guy, and I'm an MMA fan. I've covered MMA. I watched the very first UFC, November 1993. You know, I watch every MMA fight. But with MMA, you have to have different tools, obviously. You have, you know, grapple, you have to know jiu-jitsu, you have to know how to check leg kicks, etc. But in terms of the head games, the mind games, the psychology, when you only have your hands to worry about, there's so many other little facets of the sport that are psychological and not physical. The feint, did you guys see Tank's feints against Frank, especially in the second round? What we saw Tank doing in the second round with his feints and then getting Frank to tighten up and react in the second round, and we saw Gervonta smirk at him, we knew the end was coming. That's the psychological chess game I'm talking about. Those are the setups. Those are the traps. And another thing what Tank does, adding on to the psychology of it, is his accuracy. Every guy who fights him says he's not the biggest puncher, but he hits you in the sweet spot. That's accuracy. And that comes with an intuitive nature. You can't really teach accuracy. You could train it, you could drill it, but in terms of knowing, it'd be like your favorite quarterback who could lead the receiver beautifully. You know, one of the time you watch when Russell Wilson was in his prime, when you know, Mahomes makes those out of pocket passes and it looks unorthodox, but he just catches the receiver here, throws it here, boom. That's the intuitiveness that Tank has with his punches. He does know based off of his feints, based off of the early work that he's done earlier in a fight, here, his foot stomp, that sort of thing. He'll know where to throw the shot based on what his opponent is giving him. And mate, that is chess. That is not checkers. You don't see that a lot in MMA. Okay, where are we at here with the comments? I feel Tank has a Canelo effect where he hits you all over your body. It's so full, and then I feel Shakur would have the same fate as Rolly or Ryan. The difference with Shakur versus Rolly or Ryan, now this is just coming from my opinion, is Shakur Stevenson's defense and his feet. Shakur is a much better defender than both of those guys, and he's much more defensively sound. So we have to think about somebody who's optimized. Shakur doesn't waste any movements on his defense, and his hand speed, I don't know if his hand speed is as good as Ryan, at least with his hook, but I wouldn't put them in the same category in terms of skill set, boxing mind, his fight IQ for sure. Rolly's fun to watch. Rolly's one, believe it or not, Rolly's one of my favorite fighters to watch because the guy is so raw and he's not afraid to brawl. And, you know, he's more of like I think Rolly would have had a better, you know, a decent MMA career. because he's not afraid to take a shot and he has power in his hands. But he fights in such a small division that he fights against guys whose skill set is so much more heightened that you can't really get away with just power. That might work in the heavier weight classes. A guy who has a chin could give a shot and just has power, a la Deontay Wilder. But if Deontay Wilder had that skill set in like the 135 division, the 140 division, he wouldn't have had a pro career. So, kudos to Rolly for what he's been able to make out of his career without basically solidifying a lot of the holes in his game, a lot of his defense. Even how he throws punches, he doesn't come back to the ear. A lot of the things he does is because since he was a young fighter, he just has power. And sometimes that power is a double-edged sword in terms of fixing technique. It's kind of like what I think it's kind of like with if you saw Gary Antoine Russell, he lost his fight against Alberto Puello, but Puello is world class. Gary Antoine Russell, though, said in the fight leading up to it, is that the whole thing about boxing is when you fight a guy who's undefeated, that guy has never had an answer yet for what his holes are. And every fighter has holes. And Gary said his job was to find those holes. And so not all fighters lock those holes up. Not all fighters will sort of like fill in the gaps for whatever reason. Maybe you've gotten away with it your whole career because you have power. It's just much harder to not fill in the gaps in these lower weight classes than it is in the above ones. I think Shakur's gaps are way less than Ryan's gaps are and Raleigh's gaps are. So I think you'd be impressed with what the fight would look like with Shakur versus Tank. I think it wouldn't look like the fight that you think it would look like. It definitely would not look like the Frank Martin fight. Shakur would not let that front foot happen. And there's no way Tank would maraud right off jump. And Shakur wouldn't be biting on those feints either. So Shakur would be the taller guy. He'd be the longer guy. He wouldn't be, Edwin De Los Santos is huge, man. You guys have to understand how much weight De Los Santos cuts. So Shakur's a smart guy. I'm a bit late, but finally made it to the last. What's up, Rosalie? So appreciate you. Appreciate you guys tuning in, man. I do these lives every day around this time. It's 1:30 p.m. here in Sydney. Wherever you guys are tuning in, I really appreciate you. I run a health and fitness gym below my condo. So I kind of do these when I have time and I schedule it in to my business. I have clients usually early and I have clients late. So I do these lives in between my clients and I'm getting ready to go coach here shortly. But guys, it's been great. I do these every day. So subscribe to the channel. What do all the YouTubers say? What's the spiel? Do the alert thing. Subscribe, like, comment, share. I'll get that down one day. But I appreciate you for the support. We're growing. It's small and organic. But I really appreciate you guys. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. I got to run. See ya. Bang.